Have you ever made a mistake that saved your life? Usually a typo is just annoying, but for Sarah Jenkins, a single wrong digit was the difference between life and death. It was 2:00 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in Chicago. Sarah was battered, broken, and hiding in a bathroom, trying to text her brother for help. She was shaking so hard she hit the wrong number. She typed, "He broke my ribs. Please help me." She didn't text her brother. She texted Dominic Corso, the man the FBI calls the ghost of the North Side, a ruthless, devastatingly dangerous crime lord. Most men would delete the text. Dominic Corso didn't. He replied with 4 words that changed everything. "I'm on my way." This is the story of what happens when a lamb accidentally calls a wolf for protection. The pain was a sharp, jagged thing that lived on the left side of Sarah Jenkins's torso. It wasn't a dull ache. It was a screaming, white-hot lance that flared every time she dared to inhale. She was curled into a ball on the cold tile of the master bathroom in a townhouse in Lincoln Park. The door was locked, but the wood was splintering near the frame. On the other side, Richard O'Connell, Richie to his drinking buddies, a monster to Sarah, was throwing his shoulder against it. "Open the door, Sarah!" Richie screamed, his voice slurring with that specific mix of expensive scotch and unchecked rage. "Don't make me break it down. You know it gets worse when I have to break things." It was already worse. Sarah pressed a towel against her side, trying to stabilize her ribcage. She tasted copper in her mouth. He had shoved her into the granite countertop, hard enough to knock the wind out of her. And then he had kicked her when she fell. She needed to get out. Tonight was different. Usually, he apologized by now. Usually, the violence was a flash flood. Sudden, destructive, but quick to recede. Tonight, it was a rising tide. He wasn't stopping. Her phone lay on the bath mat, the screen cracked from a previous argument. Her vision swam as she reached for it. Her fingers were trembling so violently she could barely unlock the screen. She needed her brother, Matt. Matt was a paralegal. He lived 20 minutes away. If Matt came, Richie would back down. Richie was a coward when other men were in the room. She opened her messages. She didn't have time to scroll. She typed the number from memory. Matt had changed it last week. Something about dodging spam calls. 312-555-00998. No, that wasn't it. She wiped blood from her lip. 312-555-00989. She typed it in blindly, tears blurring her vision. "He broke my ribs. I can't breathe. He's going to kill me. Please help." She hit send. The phone slipped from her hand as a heavy thud shook the door. A hairline fracture appeared in the wood paneling. "I know you're texting him," Richie roared. "Tell your brother if he comes here. I'll put him in the hospital too." Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the buzz of a reply. Waiting for Matt to say, "Call 911, or I'm leaving now." The phone buzzed. She dragged it back to her face. The message was from the number she had just texted, but it wasn't Matt. Unknown. Number. Who is this? Sarah's heart stopped. She stared at the digits at the top of the screen. She had transposed the last 2 numbers. 0198, not 0189. She let out a sob that racked her broken ribs with agony. She had texted a stranger. She was going to die in this bathroom because of a typo. The door buckled again. The lock was giving way. Desperation is a strange fuel. It burns hot and fast. With nothing left to lose, Sarah typed back to the stranger. "Sarah, wrong number. I'm sorry. I'm going to die tonight. Please just call the police for me." 4202. Wellington Ave. She dropped the phone and curled tighter, protecting her head. 3 miles away, in the VIP lounge of the Obsidian, an invite-only cigar bar in the Loop, Dominic Corso frowned at his phone. The room was dimly lit, smelling of aged leather and Cuban tobacco. Across from him sat 2 city councilmen, sweating through their suits, trying to explain why a zoning permit had been denied. Dominic hadn't been listening to them anyway. He was bored. He looked at the screen. He didn't get wrong numbers. His number was encrypted, cycled every 3 months, and known only by his inner circle and 3 people in the state senate. He broke my ribs. Dominic stared at the text. He was a man who traded in violence. He understood it. He respected it as a tool, but he despised it when used without purpose. Uncontrolled violence was for animals. "Mr. Corso?" one of the councilmen asked nervously. "Did you hear our offer?" Dominic held up a hand. The silence was instant. He tapped the screen, his thumb hovering. He could ignore it. He should ignore it. It was a domestic dispute in the suburbs. Beneath him. But the address, Wellington Avenue, that was his territory. Someone was beating a woman to death in his territory, interrupting his evening. He signaled to the man standing in the shadows of the doorway. Elias, his head of security, stepped forward. "Trace this," Dominic said, sliding the phone across the mahogany table, "and get the car." "Sir, we're leaving." Dominic stood up, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket. He looked at the councilman. "Get out, we're done here." He took the phone back. He looked at the plea for police. Dominic didn't call the police. The police asked questions. Dominic provided solutions. He typed a reply as he walked out into the rain-slicked alley where his armored SUV waited. Dominic. "Lock the door. Stay down. I'm on my way." Richie finally broke the lock. The sound was like a gunshot, a sharp crack of wood splitting, followed by the heavy swing of the door hitting the tiled wall. Sarah flinched, curling into the fetal position between the toilet and the bathtub. Richie stood in the doorway, chest heaving. His tie was undone, his shirt stained with sweat. He looked like a ruin of a man, a dangerous, unstable ruin. "You think you can hide from me in my own house?" he spat, stepping over the threshold. He kicked the bath mat aside. "Richie, please," Sarah whispered, unable to shout. "I need a doctor." "You need to learn some respect," he countered, reaching down to grab her by the hair. He yanked her up. Sarah screamed, the movement tearing at her injured side. He dragged her out of the bathroom and into the master bedroom, throwing her onto the bed. She bounced on the mattress, crying out as the movement jarred her ribs. "Who were you texting?" Richie demanded, pacing at the foot of the bed. He grabbed her phone from the floor where she'd dropped it. "Let's see who you're crying to." He looked at the screen. He frowned. Who the hell is this? Who is ending a text with, "I'm on my way"? Richie laughed, a cruel, wet sound. "You got a boyfriend, Sarah? You cheating on me?" "It was a wrong number," she gasped. "I swear." "Liar." He raised the phone to throw it at the wall. Then, the front door, downstairs, exploded. It wasn't a knock. It was the sound of the entire door frame being obliterated. The house shook. Richie froze. "What the hell was that?" He dropped the phone and moved toward the bedroom door. "Who's there? I have a gun." He didn't have a gun. He had a golf club in the closet. He ran to grab it. Downstairs there was no shouting. No, "Police, open up!" Just the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots on hardwood stairs. Fast, precise. Sarah lay on the bed, unable to move, listening to the footsteps getting closer. 1 set, 2 sets, 3. Richie charged into the hallway, a 9-iron raised over his head. "Get out of my house!" Sarah heard a sickening thud, meat hitting meat, followed by a gasp and the clatter of the golf club falling down the stairs. "Richie?" she whispered. A figure filled the bedroom doorway. It wasn't Richie. The man was massive, filling the frame in a suit that cost more than Sarah's car. He had dark hair, eyes like polished flint and rain dripping from his broad shoulders. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like a judgment. 2 other men stood behind him, dragging a groaning Richie by the back of his shirt. The man in the suit stepped into the room. He surveyed the scene instantly, the overturned furniture, the blood on the bathroom floor, and Sarah, pale and broken on the bed. His eyes softened, just a fraction, when they landed on her. "Sarah?" he asked. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and terrifyingly controlled. She nodded weakly. Who are you?" "I'm the wrong number," Dominic said. He walked to the side of the bed. Up close, he smelled of rain, expensive tobacco and gun oil. He looked at her ribs, then at her face. He didn't touch her, seemingly aware that she would flinch. "Can you walk?" he asked. I don't think so." Dominic turned his head slightly toward the hallway. "Elias, deal with the trash." "Understood, boss," came the reply. Richie started screaming as he was dragged toward the stairs. "Do you know who I am? I'm a VP at O'Connell Logistics. I'll sue you. The screaming stopped abruptly with the sound of a very heavy impact. Silence returned to the house. Dominic turned back to Sarah. "I'm going to pick you up now. It's going to hurt, but I need to get you out of here." "Where are you taking me?" Sarah asked, tears leaking from her eyes. "To the hospital?" Dominic hesitated. A public hospital meant police reports. Police reports meant questions about why Dominic Corso was at the scene. He couldn't have that. But he couldn't leave her here. "I have a private doctor," Dominic said. "Better than the hospital. And discreet." "Why are you doing this?" Dominic leaned down and scooped her up into his arms. The pain flared in her ribs, and she cried out, burying her face in his wet suit jacket. He held her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing. "Because," Dominic murmured, turning to carry her out of the room, stepping over the debris of her former life. "You asked nicely." He carried her down the stairs. Sarah caught a glimpse of Richie, slumped at the bottom of the landing, unconscious, his face a ruin. She felt a flicker of fear, but looking up at the sharp jawline of the man carrying her, she felt something else. Safety. Outside, the rain was pouring. A black convoy of SUVs idled in the street, engines purring. Men with umbrellas were waiting. They opened the back door of the lead vehicle. Dominic settled her onto the leather seat. He didn't get in the front. He slid in next to her. "Drive," he commanded. As the car pulled away, leaving the townhouse and the sirens beginning to wail in the distance behind them, Sarah looked at the stranger. "I don't even know your name," she whispered, her vision fading as shock began to set in. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm Dominic." "Close your eyes, Sarah. You're safe now." And for the first time in 3 years, she believed it. Consciousness returned to Sarah in slow, painful waves. The first thing she noticed was the smell. It didn't smell like the metallic tang of blood or the stale beer that permeated Richie's townhouse. It smelled of lavender, starch, and something sterile, like rubbing alcohol. She forced her eyes open. The ceiling was high, adorned with intricate crown molding that looked like it belonged in a museum, not a bedroom. A crystal chandelier hung above her, dim and unlit. The only light came from a bedside lamp with a heavy brass base. She tried to sit up, but a sharp gasp escaped her lips as her rib cage protested. "Don't move," a voice said. It was soft but firm. Sarah froze, her eyes darting to the corner of the room. A man in a white coat was washing his hands in a porcelain basin. He wasn't Dominic. He was older, balding with wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Evans," he said, drying his hands on a towel. "Mr. Corso brought you here. You have 3 fractured ribs, a severe concussion, and significant bruising on your left kidney. You're lucky nothing ruptured." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. "Where is here?" "A safe place," Dr. Evans said, walking over to check the IV drip attached to her arm. "That's all you need to know." "I need to call my brother," Sarah rasped. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Matt, he'll be worried." "Your brother has been informed that you are safe," a deeper voice spoke from the shadows near the door. Sarah flinched. Dominic Corso stepped into the light. He had changed out of the rain-soaked suit into a black button-down shirt and dark slacks. He looked less like a corporate executive now, and more like what he truly was, a predator at rest. He walked to the foot of the bed. His presence sucked the air out of the room. He was terrifyingly handsome, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "Informed?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "What did you tell him?" "We told him you were in a car accident," Dominic said smoothly. "That you're recovering in a private facility and unable to take calls. It's better this way." "Better for who?" Sarah demanded, struggling against the pain to push herself up on her elbows. "You kidnapped me." Dominic's jaw tightened. He signaled Dr. Evans to leave. The doctor nodded, packed his bag, and slipped out of the room without a word, closing the heavy oak door behind him. "I didn't kidnap you, Sarah," Dominic said, walking around to the side of the bed. He pulled up a velvet armchair and sat down, crossing his legs. "I extracted you. There is a difference. I asked you to call the police." "And if I had?" Dominic leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Richie would have been arrested. He would have made bail in 4 hours. He would have come back to that townhouse, angrier than before, and next time he wouldn't have used a golf club. He would have used a kitchen knife." Sarah fell silent. She knew he was right. The cycle had repeated itself 3 times already. Richie always talked his way out of it. "Who are you?" she whispered. "People who break down doors and have private doctors. They aren't normal." "I'm a businessman," Dominic said, though the word sounded heavy, loaded with subtext. "I manage interests, mostly in logistics, construction, and protection." "You're the Mafia," Sarah said, the realization hitting her like a cold bucket of water. The suits, the armored car, the violence. Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. "The label is outdated, but if it helps you understand the situation, use it." He stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a grey, fog-choked morning. They were high up, overlooking a sprawling estate, surrounded by high stone walls topped with iron spikes. Lake Michigan churned in the distance, dark and angry. "You can't leave yet," Dominic said, looking out at the grounds. "Because of my ribs?" "Because of Richie." Dominic turned back to her. "You think Richie O'Connell is just a drunk middle manager?" "His last name is O'Connell," Sarah frowned. "So? His family owns a trucking company." "His family's the trucking company," Dominic corrected. "They run the unions on the south side. They move things that aren't supposed to be moved. Drugs, guns, girls." Dominic walked back to the bed, his expression grave. "By hurting him, I didn't just stop a domestic dispute. I declared war on the O'Connell family. If you walk out that gate, they will find you. They won't hurt you to teach you a lesson anymore, Sarah. They will use you to get to me." Sarah sank back against the pillows, her head spinning. She had just wanted the beating to stop. She had just wanted to text her brother. Instead, she had stumbled into the middle of a gang war. "So I'm a prisoner," she said, tears pricking her eyes. Dominic reached out. For a second, she thought he was going to strike her, and she flinched. He paused, his hand hovering in the air. then gently tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "You are a guest," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "Under my protection. And in my world, that means no one touches you without dying for it. Not even Richie." He turned and walked toward the door. "Rest. Elias will bring you food. Do not try to leave the room." The door clicked shut, the lock sliding home with a heavy thud. Sarah stared at the wood. She was safe. She was warm. She was alive. But as she looked around the opulent, silent room, she realized she had traded a cage made of fear for a cage made of gold. Dominic Corso walked down the grand staircase of his estate, his face a mask of stone. Inside, he was seething. He entered his study on the ground floor. It was a masculine room, lined with first edition books and smelling of cedar. Elias was waiting for him, standing by the large mahogany desk, holding a manila folder. "Report!" Dominic barked, pouring himself 3 fingers of whiskey. It was 10 a.m., but he hadn't slept. "Richie O'Connell is in the ICU at St. Luke's," Elias said, opening the folder. "Jaw wired shut, 2 broken legs, ruptured spleen. He's not talking to anyone for a while." "Good." Dominic took a sip of the burning liquid. "However," Elias continued, his tone cautious, "his uncle, Patrick O'Connell, knows it was us." Dominic laughed humorlessly. "Of course he knows. I left my signature on his nephew's face." "Patrick has reached out to the commission," Elias said. "He's claiming you violated the truce. He says you entered his territory and assaulted a made man's family member over a, quote, domestic misunderstanding." Dominic slammed the glass down on the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "A misunderstanding?" Dominic snarled. "He was breaking her ribs, Elias. He was going to kill her." "I know, boss. But the O'Connells don't care about the girl. To them she's property. They care about the disrespect." Elias slid a photo across the desk. It was a grainy surveillance shot of Sarah's brother, Matt, walking out of his apartment building. Dominic's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" "They're watching her family," Elias said quietly. "Patrick sent a message. He wants the girl back. He says if we return her by midnight, he'll consider the debt settled. If not, he pays a visit to the brother." Dominic stared at the photo. Matt Jenkins looked like a nice kid. Soft. He wouldn't last 5 minutes with Patrick O'Connell's enforcers. "We aren't giving her back," Dominic said, his voice cold. "Then we have a war," Elias stated simply. "Over a girl we don't know." Dominic looked up at his head of security. Elias had been with him for 10 years. He was loyal, but he was practical. In their world, you didn't start wars for strangers. You started wars for profit or territory. "She's not a stranger anymore," Dominic said. "She called me. I answered." "That's a contract." "Is it?" Elias asked. "Or is it because she looks like her?" The room went deadly silent. Dominic's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. "Get out." Elias nodded stiffly and left the room. Dominic sank into his leather chair, running a hand over his face. He looked at the security monitor on his desk. It showed the feed from the guest bedroom. Sarah was sitting up in bed, staring at the wall. Elias was wrong. Sarah didn't look like her. Dominic's late wife, Maria, who had died in a car bombing 5 years ago. Maria had been fiery, dark-haired, Italian. Sarah was fair, fragile, broken, but the look in her eyes, that terror mixed with defiance, that was the same. Dominic pressed the intercom button. "Send more men to the brother's apartment. If O'Connell's goons get within 50 feet of him, put them in the ground. Quietly." He stood up. He needed to talk to Sarah. He needed to explain the reality of her situation without terrifying her further. He walked back upstairs. When he unlocked the door to her room, he found her standing by the window, clutching her side. She was wearing one of his silk robes, which swallowed her small frame. "You should be in bed," Dominic said. She spun around, wincing. "I heard shouting." "Business?" Dominic said dismissively. "Is it about me?" Sarah asked. She walked toward him, her movements slow and stiff. "Is Richie's family coming?" Dominic hesitated. He could lie. He could tell her everything was fine. But looking at her, he realized she had survived Richie O'Connell for 3 years. She knew when a man was lying. "They want you back," Dominic admitted. Sarah's face went pale. And I told them to go to hell." Sarah let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. She took another step closer to him. The fear was still there, but something else was rising in her eyes. Curiosity. "Why?" she asked. "I'm nobody. I'm a typo. You're risking your life, your business, for a typo?" Dominic looked down at her. He could smell the lavender soap on her skin. She was so close, he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes. "I don't like bullies," Dominic said softly. "And I don't like giving up things that belong to me." Sarah stiffened. "I don't belong to you." Dominic took a step closer, closing the gap. He towered over her, his presence overwhelming. The air between them crackled with a strange, dark electricity. "You texted me, Sarah," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "You asked for help. In my world, when you ask a king for a favor, you become his responsibility. You are under my roof. You are eating my food. You are wearing my clothes." He reached out, his hand grasping her chin gently, tilting her head up so she had to look him in the eye. "Until I say you are safe," he whispered, "you belong to me completely. Because the alternative is death." Sarah didn't pull away. Her heart hammered against her bruised ribs. She should be terrified. This man was claiming ownership of her like she was a piece of land. But as she looked into his dark, storm-cloud eyes, she didn't feel the revulsion she felt with Richie. She felt a strange, magnetic pull, a moth drawn to a blue flame. "What about my brother?" she whispered. "He is being watched," Dominic said. "Protected. Can I talk to him?" "No, not yet. It's too dangerous to trace the call." Sarah pulled back, breaking his hold. "I need to know he's okay. Please." Dominic sighed. He pulled a burner phone from his pocket. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Status," Dominic commanded. "Target is secure," a voice crackled on the line. "He's at his office. We have 2 units on the perimeter. No sign of O'Connell's men yet." "Keep it that way," Dominic said, and hung up. He showed her the screen. "He is safe." Sarah nodded, tears of relief spilling over. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Dominic said, his face hardening. "The O'Connells aren't going to stop. Patrick O'Connell is old school. He believes in blood for blood." Suddenly, Dominic's personal phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A text message. He read it, and the blood drained from his face. "Trort. Jedinamotad, you watch the brother. But who is watching the sister?" Dominic looked up at Sarah, panic flaring in his chest for the first time in years. "Get down!" he roared. He tackled her, driving her to the floor just as the window shattered. Crack thwump. A canister sailed through the broken glass, skittering across the Persian rug. It hissed, spewing thick, white smoke. Tear gas. "They're here," Dominic coughed, covering Sarah's body with his own as the room filled with blinding white fog. They breached the perimeter. The bedroom door kicked open. Men in gas masks poured into the room, assault rifles raised. Dominic reached for the gun tucked into his waistband, but he was blinded. choking. He fired 2 shots blindly into the smoke. Bang! Bang! And heard a body drop. But there were too many of them. A heavy boot connected with Dominic's temple. He saw stars, his grip on Sarah loosening. "Grab the girl!" a distorted voice shouted through a mask. "Dominic!" Sarah screamed, her hand grasping for his. He tried to hold on, his fingers brushing hers, but another kick to his ribs rolled him over. He watched through the haze, his vision swimming, as 2 men dragged a screaming Sarah out of the room. Dominic tried to rise, but darkness swallowed him. The last thing he heard was Sarah calling his name, and the realization that the war hadn't just started. He was already losing. The world came back to Sarah in a haze of throbbing pain and the smell of diesel fumes. She was seated on a hard metal chair, her wrists zip-tied behind her back. The strain on her shoulders sent fiery spasms through her fractured ribs. She gasped, her head lolling forward. "She's awake." The voice was gravelly, aged by decades of smoke and shouting. Sarah lifted her head. She was in a warehouse. It was cavernous, dimly lit by flickering halogen bulbs that buzzed like angry hornets. Stacks of shipping crates formed a maze around her. In front of her stood an older man. He wore a pristine tan raincoat over a suit that looked too tight for his thick neck. He had a face like a bulldog, jowls heavy, eyes watery but sharp. This was Patrick O'Connell. Beside him, in a motorized wheelchair, sat a figure wrapped in bandages. "Richie?" Sarah whispered. Richie didn't speak. He couldn't. His jaw was wired shut, a metal cage holding his face together. His eyes, however, screamed. They were filled with a toxic mix of humiliation and murderous rage. He made a muffled, guttural sound and pointed a trembling finger at her. "Quiet, Richard," Patrick snapped. He looked at Sarah with a detached curiosity, like a butcher inspecting a side of beef. "So this is the girl who cost me $3 million in contracts and my nephew's face." "I didn't do anything," Sarah rasped. "He was beating me." Patrick stepped closer, the smell of peppermint and stale cigars wafting off him. "In our world, miss, the truth doesn't matter. Only the consequence matters. Dominic Corso crossed a line. He entered my home. He touched my blood." Patrick pulled a phone out of his pocket. Sarah recognized it immediately. It was hers. The screen was cracked, but it was still working. "You have an interesting contact list," Patrick mused, scrolling through it. "Dominic isn't saved as Dominic. He's just a number." He held the phone up to her face. "Unlock it." "No," Sarah said, her voice shaking but defiant. Patrick didn't yell. He didn't hit her. He simply nodded to a man standing in the shadows behind her. The man stepped forward and pressed his thumb hard against Sarah's broken ribs. Sarah screamed. The pain was blinding, white-hot, encompassing her entire universe. She sobbed, curling in on herself as much as the bonds would allow. "Unlock it," Patrick repeated calmly, "or I'll have him break the rest of them, one by one." Sobbing, unable to breathe, Sarah looked at the phone. The facial recognition unlocked the screen. Patrick smiled. "Good girl." He opened the messaging app. He found the thread with the 0198 number. "He came for you once," Patrick said, his thumbs flying over the keypad. "Let's see if he's stupid enough to do it again." Sarah watched in horror as Patrick typed a message. He wasn't asking for a negotiation. He was setting a trap. "Sarah, via Patrick. They have me. Southside Docks. Warehouse 4. Come alone or they kill me." He hit send. "He won't come," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He's a businessman. You said it yourself. He won't walk into a trap for a stranger." Patrick laughed. It was a dry, wheezing sound. You don't know Dominic Corso. He isn't a businessman. He's a rabid dog pretending to be a purebred. His pride is his weakness. He thinks he's untouchable. Patrick tossed the phone onto a nearby crate. Now, we wait. If he shows up, we kill him, and maybe I let you live as a servant for Richard. If he doesn't show up, well, the Chicago River is very deep. Time stretched. Every minute felt like an hour. Sarah watched the dust motes dancing in the light, praying that Dominic was smart, praying he was cold, praying he would stay away. Ping! The sound of the notification echoed in the silent warehouse. Patrick picked up the phone. His eyebrows shot up. Well, well, he muttered. The ghost has a death wish. He turned the screen so Sarah could see the reply. Dominic, I'm on my way. Sarah closed her eyes, a wave of sickness washing over her. He was coming, and he was walking straight into a slaughterhouse. Patrick turned to his men, about 20 of them, armed with shotguns and pistols, hiding in the shadows of the shipping containers. Positions, Patrick barked. Crossfire pattern. As soon as he steps through that door, turn him into Swiss cheese. The rain had returned, harder than before. It lashed against the corrugated metal roof of Warehouse 4, drumming a deafening rhythm that masked the sound of the approaching engine. Inside the warehouse, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Patrick O'Connell stood near Sarah, a heavy revolver in his hand. He checked his watch. He's late, Patrick muttered. Maybe he's smarter than you think, Sarah said, her voice hoarse. Or maybe he's a coward, Patrick sneered. Suddenly the lights went out. All of them. The hum of the halogen bulbs died, plunging the vast warehouse into absolute, pitch-black darkness. "Backup generator!" Patrick screamed. "Get the lights on! Watch the doors!" The men shouted to each other, flashlights clicking on, beams cutting through the dusty dark like lightsabers. They swept the beams frantically toward the main entrance, fingers twitching on triggers. Crash. The sound didn't come from the door. It came from the skylight, 40 feet above them. Glass rained down like diamonds in the flashlight beams. A dark shape dropped from the ceiling, plummeting toward the floor on a repelling line. It wasn't Dominic. It was a canister. It hit the concrete floor with a metallic clang and exploded. Not smoke this time. Flashbang. A blinding white light seared the retinas of everyone looking at it, accompanied by a thunderclap that shattered eardrums. Sarah screamed, squeezing her eyes shut, but even through her eyelids, the light was agonizing. Chaos erupted. Patrick's men were blind, deaf, and panicked. They started firing wildly into the dark. Then, the slaughter began. From the shadows of the loading dock, the opposite side of where they were looking, Dominic Corso emerged. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing tactical gear, black body armor, mag pouches, and a suppressed assault rifle. He moved with a terrifying fluidity, a predator in his natural element. Put. 3 shots. 3 men dropped before they even knew he was there. "He's inside!" someone screamed. Dominic didn't stop. He moved between the crates, using the confusion as a weapon. He was a ghost, appearing for a split second to deliver a double tap to a chest, then vanishing back into the gloom. Patrick grabbed Sarah by her hair, hauling her up. "Back! Fall back to the office!" He dragged her backward, using her body as a shield. Sarah stumbled, her ribs screaming, her feet dragging on the concrete. She saw flashes of gunfire in the dark. She saw men falling. It wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. Dominic wasn't fighting a war. He was cleaning house. One of Patrick's enforcers, a giant of a man with a shotgun, lunged out from behind a forklift. Dominic dropped his rifle. It was empty, and drew a serrated combat knife from his chest rig. He sidestepped the shotgun blast, the buckshot tearing into a crate of electronics. In one fluid motion, Dominic drove the knife into the man's brachial artery. He didn't pause to watch him fall. He grabbed the dying man's shotgun, spun, and fired one-handed at a gunman on the catwalk above. The gunman fell, crashing onto the conveyor belt below. "Dominic!" Sarah screamed as Patrick dragged her through a heavy steel door into the foreman's office. Patrick slammed the door and locked it. He shoved Sarah into the corner. The office had a large glass window overlooking the warehouse floor. Below, the shooting had stopped. The silence was heavier than the noise. Patrick was panting, sweat dripping down his bulldog face. He pressed his revolver against Sarah's temple. "He can't get in here," Patrick wheezed. "This glass is bulletproof. The door is reinforced steel." He yelled through the glass. "Corso, I know you can hear me. Take one more step and I paint the wall with her brains." Out in the dark warehouse, a figure stepped into the pool of light from the single emergency bulb that had flickered on. Dominic stood amidst the carnage. He was covered in grime, and blood that wasn't his splattered his face. He looked up at the office window. He looked at the gun pressed to Sarah's head. He didn't raise his weapon. He dropped the shotgun to the floor. "Let her go, Patrick!" Dominic's voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the metal building. "And I'll let you live." Patrick laughed, hysterical now. "You think I'm stupid? You killed my men. You think I'm walking out of here?" "You have 10 seconds, Dominic said calmly. He reached into his pocket. "Don't you move!" Patrick screamed, cocking the hammer of the revolver. The metal felt cold and hard against Sarah's skin. She squeezed her eyes shut, preparing for the end. Dominic pulled out a small remote detonator. "What is that?" Patrick yelled. "You checked the front door," Dominic said. "You checked the back door. You didn't check the foundation." Dominic's thumb hovered over the button. "I didn't come here to rescue her, Patrick. I came here to bury you." "You're bluffing!" Patrick shrieked. "You'll kill her too." "I'm a bad man, Patrick," Dominic said, his eyes locking with Sarah's through the glass. There was an apology in them, a silent goodbye. "I don't leave loose ends." Sarah's breath hitched. "He's going to kill us all." 5 seconds, Dominic counted down. "You crazy son of a bitch." Patrick's hand wavered. He looked at the detonator, then at Sarah, then back at Dominic. The fear of death, certain, explosive death, overrode his desire for revenge. Patrick shoved Sarah away and scrambled for the back exit of the office. "I'm leaving! Don't do it!" He fumbled with the latch of the back door. The moment Patrick's gun left Sarah's head, Dominic moved. He didn't press the detonator. He threw it aside. It was a garage door opener. He raised a pistol he had concealed behind his back and fired 3 shots through the bulletproof glass. The glass wasn't bulletproof against high-caliber rounds, fired at the same structural point. It spiderwebbed, then shattered. Patrick spun around as the glass rained down. Dominic vaulted through the broken window, landing in the office like an avenging angel. Patrick raised his gun, but he was too slow. Dominic didn't shoot him. He grabbed Patrick's wrist, twisting it until the bone snapped with a wet crunch. Patrick screamed, dropping the gun. Dominic kicked Patrick in the chest, sending him flying back against the desk. Sarah huddled in the corner, shaking uncontrollably. Dominic stood over Patrick, breathing hard. "I told you," Dominic whispered, leaning down. "I'm on my way." "Please," Patrick gurgled, holding his broken wrist. "The commission, they'll kill you for this. Let them try." Dominic raised his pistol and silenced Patrick O'Connell forever. The room went quiet, save for the hum of the ventilation. Dominic turned slowly to Sarah. The rage in his eyes faded, replaced by exhaustion and intense concern. He holstered his gun and fell to his knees beside her. "Sarah," he breathed, reaching out to touch her face. His hands were shaking. "Did he hurt you?" Sarah looked at the dead man, then at the shattered window, then at Dominic. She realized then that the detonator was a lie. He had gambled her life on a bluff. She slapped him. It was weak, barely a tap against his cheek, but the sound rang out. You crazy," she sobbed. Dominic didn't pull away. He took her hand and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart, which was beating like a jackhammer. "I know," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. "I know. I've got you." Sarah collapsed against him, the adrenaline crashing. She buried her face in his tactical vest, smelling the cordite and the rain. "Let's go home," Dominic said, lifting her up. "Do I have a home?" Sarah asked, her voice muffled. Dominic paused. He looked around the ruin of the warehouse. He looked at the bodies he had left in his wake. He had started a war that would burn Chicago to the ground. There was no going back to his old life, and there was no going back for her. "Yes," Dominic said firmly, carrying her out of the office. "With me." The drive back to the estate was performed in a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. The adrenaline had faded, leaving Sarah shivering in the passenger seat of the armored SUV. Her ribs were a dull, grinding agony, but the pain was distant. Her mind was stuck on the image of Patrick O'Connell's body slumped over the desk. Dominic drove with one hand on the wheel. His knuckles were white. He kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting a tail, but the streets of Chicago were empty. The rain washed the blood from the windshield, but it couldn't wash away what had happened. "You killed him," Sarah whispered, staring out at the blur of streetlights. "Yes," Dominic said. He didn't offer excuses. "They will come for you now, the others. The commission you talked about. Let them come." "You did it for me," she said, turning her head to look at him. His profile was sharp, illuminated by the dashboard lights. "Why? You don't even know me." Dominic pulled the car up to the heavy iron gates of his estate. He punched in the code, and the gates swung open. He parked in front of the fountain, killed the engine, and finally looked at her. "I spent my whole life building walls, Sarah. Building a business, accruing power. It was cold, it was empty," Dominic said, his voice raspy. "When I saw that text, when I saw you in that bathroom, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Innocence. And the idea that a man like Richie could destroy that innocence just because he was angry. It offended me." He leaned in, his dark eyes searching hers. "And maybe, when I carried you out of that house, I realized I didn't want to be the monster anymore. I wanted to be the shield." Sarah felt a tear slide down her cheek. She reached out, her fingers brushing the dried blood on his cheekbone. "You're not a monster, Dominic." "Tonight I was," he said grimly, "and tomorrow I have to be something worse." The retribution came swiftly, but not with guns. It came with a black envelope delivered by courier at 6 a.m. Dominic was in the kitchen, bandaging a cut on his forearm. Sarah sat at the island, wrapped in a blanket, drinking tea laced with painkillers. Elias walked in, his face pale. He placed the black envelope on the counter. It was sealed with red wax, the crest of the Chicago Commission. "It's from Salvatore Rossi," Elias said. Dominic went still. Salvatore Rossi was the capo di tutti capi, the boss of bosses, the man who held the leash of every crime family in the Midwest. He was 80 years old, used a cane, and was rumored to have dissolved his own son in a vat of acid for skimming profits. "When?" Dominic asked. "Noon, today, at the Breathless." The Breathless was a neutral ground, a high-end steakhouse downtown that Rossi owned. "He wants to negotiate," Sarah asked, hopefully. Dominic ripped open the envelope. He read the single card inside. A life for a life. Bring the girl. Dominic crushed the card in his fist. He doesn't want to negotiate. He wants an execution. He wants me? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. He wants a witness, Dominic said. He wants to kill me in front of you to show the city what happens when you break the rules. Then he'll hand you over to the O'Connell family to finish what Richie started. Dominic turned to Elias. Get the jet ready. Take Sarah to the airstrip. I want her in Zurich by tonight. No, Sarah said. Dominic spun around. This isn't a discussion. I'm not running, Sarah said, standing up. She winced, clutching her ribs, but she stood tall. If I run, you die. They'll hunt you down. I can handle Rossi. You can't, Sarah countered. You said he's the king. You can't kill a king and expect to live. Unless... She paused, a dangerous idea forming in her mind. A lie so bold it might just work. Unless what? Dominic asked. Unless you didn't break the rules, Sarah said, her eyes hardening. What is the rule about family? Dominic frowned. You cannot touch a made man's family. That's the oldest law. Patrick hurt me, Sarah said. Richie hurt me. You aren't family, Sarah. You're a stranger. Sarah walked around the island. She took Dominic's hand. Not if we change the story. Not if I'm your fiancé. The room went silent. Elias looked at Sarah with wide eyes. Dominic stared at her, stunned. If I'm your fiancé, Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength, then Richie O'Connell beat the wife of a boss. That means he broke the rules. That means Patrick insulted you. That means you were within your rights to kill them. It's a lie, Dominic said. Rossi will smell it. Then we make it the truth, Sarah whispered. I have nothing left, Dominic. My apartment is a crime scene. My ex is a monster. My life ended the moment I sent that text. I want this life. I want to be with you. Dominic looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. It was the same fire he had seen in the warehouse. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a queen in the making. It's a death sentence if it fails, Dominic warned. I'm already dead if I leave you, Sarah replied. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. He turned to Elias. Get the car, Dominic commanded, and stop at the vault. I need the ring, the family ring. The private dining room at the Breathless was lined with mirrors. It was designed so that no one could sneak up on you. Salvatore Rossi sat at the head of the table, cutting a piece of rare steak. 4 armed guards stood by the walls. Dominic walked in. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing a tuxedo, and on his arm, wearing a black evening gown that Elias had procured, walked Sarah. She was terrified, but she didn't show it. Her makeup covered the bruises. Her broken ribs were wrapped tight beneath the silk. She held her head high. Rossi didn't look up from his steak. You're late, Corso, and you brought a guest to your own funeral. Disrespectful. I brought my justification, Dominic said, pulling out a chair for Sarah. Rossi stopped chewing. He looked up. His eyes were milky, dead things. He looked at Sarah. This is the girl? The typo? This is Sarah Jenkins, Dominic said, his voice ringing through the room. My fiancée. Rossi paused. He put down his knife and fork. He picked up a napkin and wiped his mouth slowly. Fiancée, Rossi repeated. Since when? I hear you met her 2 days ago. We have been seeing each other for 6 months, Dominic lied smoothly. We kept it private to protect her from animals like Richie O'Connell. It seems I failed. Rossi looked at Sarah. Is this true, Signorina? Sarah looked the old man in the eye. Yes. Dominic gave me this ring weeks ago. She raised her left hand. On her finger sat a massive, emerald-cut diamond, an heirloom of the Corso family. "Richie O'Connell beat me," Sarah said, her voice steady. "He broke my ribs. He threatened my life. Dominic did what any man at this table would do. He protected what was his." Rossi stared at her. The air in the room was so tense it felt like it might shatter. He looked at the ring. He looked at the bruises on her neck that the makeup couldn't quite hide. Then he looked at Dominic. "Patrick O'Connell was a good earner," Rossi said softly. "But he was sloppy. He let his nephew run wild." Rossi took a sip of wine. "If she is your fiancée, Corso, then O'Connell committed a grave sin. You were within your rights." Dominic didn't exhale. He waited. "However," Rossi continued, his voice dropping an octave, "you caused a mess. A warehouse destroyed. Police asking questions. A seat on the commission empty." "I will pay for the damages," Dominic said immediately. "And I will take over O'Connell's territory. I will double the earnings within a quarter." Rossi swirled his wine. He looked at Sarah again. He seemed to be weighing the value of a dead O'Connell against a live, ambitious Corso. "A wedding," Rossi said suddenly. "Excuse me?" Dominic asked. "If this is real," Rossi smiled, revealing yellow teeth, "then there must be a wedding. A public one. To show the families that we are united, that this wasn't a gang war, but a matter of honor." Rossi pointed a bony finger at them. "1 month. You get married in the cathedral. All the families attend. If there is no wedding, then I know you lied to me, and I will kill you both at the altar." Dominic looked at Sarah. This was it. The trap had snapped shut. They were bound now. Sarah didn't flinch. She squeezed Dominic's hand. "We would be honored, Don Rossi," Sarah said. Rossi laughed. He waved his hand dismissively. "Go! Get out of my sight! And Corso?" Dominic paused at the door. "She's tougher than she looks," Rossi muttered. "Don't break this one." 6 months later. The reception was held at the Corso estate. It was the event of the decade. Every crime boss, politician, and union leader in Chicago was there, drinking champagne and pretending they weren't murderers. Sarah stood on the balcony overlooking the party. She wore a white dress that cost more than her brother's college tuition. Her ribs had healed, though they ached when it rained. She wasn't Sarah Jenkins, the terrified victim anymore. She was Sarah Corso. She watched the crowd below. She saw Elias coordinating security. She saw her brother Matt laughing with one of Dominic's associates. Matt didn't know the full truth, only that his sister had married a logistics magnate, and that was enough to keep him safe. The glass doors behind her opened. Dominic stepped out. He loosened his tie. "Hiding?" he asked. "Just thinking," Sarah said. Dominic walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder. "About what?" "About a typo," she said softly. "About how 1 digit changed the entire world." "Do you regret it?" Dominic asked. He asked her this every week. He was terrified that one day she would wake up and realize she had married a monster. Sarah turned in his arms. She looked at the man who had burned down a warehouse for her, the man who had faced down Salvatore Rossi for her, the man who treated her like she was made of glass, yet trusted her with his empire. She saw the darkness in him, yes, but she also saw the devotion. "No," Sarah whispered. She kissed him, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of champagne and promises. "I don't believe in accidents, Dominic. I think I texted the right number all along." Dominic smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Come inside, Mrs. Corso," he said, offering his hand. "Our guests are waiting." Sarah took his hand. She stepped back into the light, leaving the ghost of her past in the dark, ready to rule the kingdom she had accidentally inherited. And that is the story of Sarah Jenkins and Dominic Corso, a story that reminds us that sometimes Fate doesn't knock on the door. It buzzes in your pocket. Authorities never officially linked Dominic Corso to the disappearance of Patrick O'Connell. The warehouse fire was ruled an electrical accident. To this day, the O'Connell family remains a shadow of its former self, while the Corso Empire controls the north side with an iron grip. Some say this is just an urban legend, but if you check the Chicago Social Registry, you will find a Sarah Corso listed as a philanthropist, and if you look closely at the photos, you'll see the man standing behind her, always watching, always protecting. So the next time you send a text, double-check the number. You never know who might reply. If you loved this story, please smash that like button. It helps us create more long-form storytelling like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next true crime drama. Thanks for watching.